So last season, the Boston Celtics had one of the most disappointing seasons throughout all the teams in the NBA. As we all know, they would eventually get beat by the Brooklyn Nets in 5 games without Jaylen Brown, who didn't play throughout the entire postseason due to him having a wrist injury. Throughout the entire regular season for the Boston Celtics, pretty much to summarize it, everything that could possibly went wrong for the Celtics went wrong. I mean, there was injuries, players going into the COVID protocols, overall players just not performing the way they should have. However, throughout the entire offseason, the Boston Celtics has been one of the most slept on teams and overlooked teams in the entire NBA after making some moves by, signing some free agents, trading away some of their assets to get some players in return. So in today's video, I want to talk about the Boston Celtics, the horrible, disappointing season that they had, the moves that they made during this year's free agency and offseason, talking about where they can place in the Eastern Conference standing. So if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already and enjoyed the content, comment out on this channel. I would greatly appreciate that. As always, check out my last video that I did on Bol and answering the question on if he is overhyped as an NBA player. And with all that being said, let's talk about this Boston Celtics. So first, let's talk about the previous season that they had. Like I said, everything that could have went wrong for them went wrong. I mean, beginning of the season, they were in the middle of the pack. They weren't doing that bad, but also, they could have been better. As we all know, in the beginning of the regular season, teams were going into COVID protocols, players were just missing a whole bunch of time. And one of the teams that were heavily affected by COVID was the Boston Celtics, where their number one guy of Jason Tatum ended up catching the Rona. He had to miss some time, and obviously when a team misses their number one fucking guy, all hell breaks loose and they start losing games. As soon as Jason Tatum came back, he had to be able to get some rhythm. He publicly stated that, the Rona pretty much fucked up his lungs. And, he has to use an inhaler now before, playing. Like I said, the Boston Celtics, they were heavily affected by COVID. Players were just going out left and right. I mean, they were just not able to be fully healthy. Some of the guys like Jaylen Brown, Payton Pritchard, Kemba Walker during the start of the season, he wasn't even able to play due to, his knees. But coming into the playoffs, they were starting to get the groove. Things were finally going well for them. But as soon as things were going, pretty good for them, something bad had to happen. So obviously after having that type of a season, a whole lot of people they weren't, high on the Boston Celtics anymore. Especially, thinking about in the bubble last year, they were in the Eastern Conference Finals, and now they're a first round exit. But after this year's free agency and offseason, like I said, I believe that they are one of the slept on teams throughout the entire NBA. First, obviously the big one, they traded away Kemba Walker and their first round pick and for Al Horford, Moses Brown, and like a second round pick. Obviously with Kemba Walker, he was just not ever able to get fully healthy. It was always an issue with his knees, or just he was always dealing with some dumbass injury, and it was not good for the amount of money that he was being paid. So that was a major W for the Celtics to be able to trade away Kemba Walker's contract. We wanted to get a guy like Al Horford, who has been on the team before. He has chemistry with those guys. He knows them. He has played with them previously. They were able to, free up some cap space and, be able to set up for some future moves that they were able to make, in which they would trade away, Moses Brown and maybe like a pick for like Josh Richardson from the Mavericks. In essence, it's a pretty good 3-and-D wing. He had a pretty off last 2 years with him being with the 76ers, did not perform really well, and obviously with the Dallas Mavericks, playing with Luka, they just end up not working. And be able to get a guy like him who for cheap, I would say that's another W as well, getting more depth on their team. More recently, they were able to sign Dennis Schroeder for like a 1-year, $5 million deal. And again, that was a big steal for the Celtics, because obviously, as we all know, NBA Twitter has been bashing that man, pretty much clowning him for turning down a 4-year, $84 million contract extension with the Lakers. Ended up saying, fuck it, I want more money. Pretty much saying that he's worth $100 million. Obviously, he didn't get that contract extension during that time, and he didn't prove it, because in the playoffs, he underperformed. Nigga scored 0 points in game 5. Obviously, his value went fucking down after that season with the Lakers. But to be able to sign him for cheap, but knowing how good he can be in a place where he's comfortable in, I would say, again, W for the Celtics for making that move. Also, another thing I liked about the Celtics offseason is that they didn't try to go out their way to overpay players in order to keep on the roster. The one guy I'm talking about is Evan Fournier. Obviously, they got him during the trade deadline for only like 2 second-round picks, so it wasn't that much. But I mean, Evan Fournier on the Celtics, he did not perform well at all. He underperformed. I mean, the first game he played for the Celtics, I'm pretty sure he got like 0 fucking points. When they played the Brooklyn Nets, he underperformed as well. Even when Jaylen Brown got out, he had the ball in his hands more, and he was not able to perform well. So I loved how they did not overpay him. They just took that L. Brad Stevens just took his L, and they just let him walk. So a common theme with all these signings and trades, all these acquisitions that they have gotten throughout this free agency is that they're getting depth. They're getting more players who can provide more coming off of the bench, or just when they're needed to play, they can play. That was a big issue that they had last season when things went wrong for them, when players started getting injured and players started getting into the COVID protocols. They didn't have no one on that fucking bench that can provide. I mean, they have Payton Pritchard, but they needed more. But now, after signing those guys, they have a whole lot of depth, man. I mean, and also, as I'm recording this video, it's been like a couple days after Marcus Smart has signed a contract extension with the Celtics. They are starting to build a culture by, establishing some continuity with their team. I believe that's one of the most underrated things when it comes to building a roster. I believe that having continuity, be able to have guys that are familiar with each other, is good for the long haul. I mean, if you look at the roster, everyone on the roster pretty much has a chip on their shoulder or have something to prove. Everyone that's on the Celtics roster previously, last season, first round exit, now they have something to prove. Dennis Schroeder, obviously that nigga has something to prove. Holy fuck, I mean, that man gave up $84 million. So obviously he's betting on himself. So all these guys are hungry, I believe, and that's establishing culture. So I believe Brad Stevens has done a good job of first gaining some depth for their team, maintaining some continuity, and establishing a culture for this team. They're pretty much solved a whole lot of problems that they had last season. So now let's talk about where they can potentially be when the NBA season starts and where they can be in the Eastern Conference standings. I believe that things just go way better than they did last season. I think they could potentially be a 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, or potentially even the 3rd seed regarding the other situations in the Eastern Conference. I mean, you have the Bucks, who are obviously the top 3, Brooklyn Nets. 76ers, you don't know. We do not know the situation with Ben Simmons. After that, I mean, you got the Miami Heat getting Kyle Lowry and be able to keep Duncan Robinson as well. And also, you got the Chicago Bulls, who finally has gotten tackling some fucking help. The East is very competitive when it comes to the seeding. Ultimately, it's going to come down to who is the more healthier team. For the Celtics, I mean, literally anything better than last season probably get them higher up in the NBA standings for the Eastern Conference. So the Celtics are able to stay relatively healthy. I really do see them being a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference, and depending on the 76ers or just based off of injuries, I mean, they can potentially be a top 3 seed. So that's it for the video. Hope y'all enjoyed it. Please leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already and enjoys the content coming on this channel. I would greatly appreciate it as always. Give me your thoughts down below. With all that being said, hope y'all give us your day, and I'm out. Peace out, y'all.